My first introduction to Kiersten White wasn't Lucy Undying or Mr. Magic. It was Hyde that found me first. White wove a tale of struggle and oppression and threw in monsters as if Mac didn't have enough to deal with. She mastered the pacing of horror and suspense, and I completely loved it, and now I pick up every book she writes. Thank you for being here, Kiersten.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and for saying such nice things about Hyde. I love that book, which I
I
maybe sounds arrogant since I wrote it, but whatever.
No, it's so well done, but I feel like you outdid yourself in The Fox and the Devil here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, The Fox and the Devil, I think, is one of the favorite things I've written in the last like many years. It was one of those books that just sort of came together like magic. It was really pleasant to write. The research was fun. The revision was easy. So yeah, it's definitely like obviously we don't have favorite children among our books, but we do, and The Fox and the Devil is one of them.
Well, it's the favorite for now because it's one of the most recent, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
For folks who might not have heard of The Fox and the Devil, can you give a little brief description?
Yeah, so The Fox and the Devil stars Annika van Helsing, who is the daughter of Abraham van Helsing of Dracula fame. And after her father is murdered under suspicious circumstances, she devotes her life to becoming a forensic detective and eventually, hopefully, hunting down the ethereally beautiful woman she thinks killed her father. But in the course of hunting Diavola, she discovers that there might be something even more sinister going on and has to reckon with the fact that she assumed her father was crazy at the end of his life and maybe he was onto something.
It's funny how many times people and Annika say that her father was crazy um, and the whole time you're like, but all the things.
Yeah. That's one of the fun things about playing with existing canon characters, right? I love the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. I think it's brilliant. I think it's also hugely flawed. And so I loved getting to play with Abraham van Helsing because as soon as you introduce him, the reader immediately knows this is a world in which the supernatural exists. But our main character, Annika, is a scientist and she does not know that. And so the course of that, there's that, what is it called? Dramatic irony of as the reader you know what's coming, but she doesn't, and she has no reason to. So that's one of my favorite things about retellings or using elements from existing classic stories is that you do get to sort of wink at the audience because you're coming in with a base of knowledge that your characters don't necessarily have. And it's really fun to play with.
And for folks who might not know, you actually won a Bram Stoker Award for it was the Frankenstein retelling, right?
Yeah, The Dark Descendants of Frankenstein. I did. I won a Bram Stoker Award from the Horror Writers Association for a different retelling, one that I paired up with Mary Shelley for. Obviously I love classic horror. Frankenstein I think is one of my favorite novels of all time. Dracula I have a much more complicated relationship with because so much of it is so brilliant and
Mhm.
Stoker had such a way with descriptions and characterizations, but also it treats his female characters horribly.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I kept coming back to it, right? A lot of my retellings or things that use elements from existing stories exist because I love the source material, but also it makes me angry.
As all the best kinds of books do, I think that were
Yeah,
written,
yeah,
before immediately.
yeah. No, it's very true. Yeah.
So that kind of brings up um, there are two main protagonists in the story. There's Annika, and then there's Diavola, or I'm saying it wrong. I know I am because I listened to the audiobook.
Is that how they say in the audiobook?
I don't think it's Diavola exactly, but she has an accent, so maybe it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. Yeah, I can't listen to audiobooks. I can't focus on them, but I did pick the narrators and listen to them for a little bit and oh, they were so good. So I've always just said it Diavola, but
Diavola,
again,
yes.
like I am coming to this from English and Spanish speaking only. So like when they were asking me pronunciations for the audiobook, and I'm like, I do not know. Let me consult my husband who speaks German and Greek and four other languages. But it's always embarrassing when I have to provide pronunciations for my audiobooks because I'm like, I just wrote the words. I don't know how to say them.
Yeah, I feel like that's perfectly valid and we shouldn't shun people or shame them.
My fifth grade teacher always put it, "You're a reader, not a talker." I've always appreciated that point of view.
But she is the other point of view in this story that we get. And she's a really interesting point of view because we don't get a whole ton of her.
Yeah.
So who is she that you can actually say, I guess?
Yeah, so Annika obviously has seen this woman standing over her father's dying body and assumes this woman murdered her father. Nobody believes her. And it isn't until years later that Annika links another crime scene to similarities and sees a photo with Diavola in the background at a crime scene. And so this sets her off on the hunt, and Diavola begins leaving letters at these crime scenes for Annika. And they were so fun to write because they really walk the line between like, is she threatening to kill me or does she want to kiss me? And which would I prefer? So it was really, really fun getting to inhabit this sort of voice of a woman who is so disconnected from humanity, but also still finds things beautiful or haunting or alluring there, and is clearly fixated on Annika with this exact same amount of obsession that Annika has fixated on her. And I really loved that challenge of writing a relationship that, is toxic. Annika, is chasing the killer of her father, but also like cannot deny that there is something else there, and that the fascination and the obsession maybe has tipped over into something more. So writing from Diavola's perspective with those letters was really, really fun to sort of walk that line.
I loved it because it came as a surprise when I read it the first time. I was like, oh, we're really switching now, aren't we? Because it's like a whole
Yeah.
new section of just these letters.
Yes. So the book exists in several parts. The main point of view is Annika's, and then you also get interludes taking place in the future at the 1900 Paris World Fair, which the book is sort of leading up to. And then in the middle, well, not in the middle, I don't know, like a third in, who knows? You have a section that are just Diavola's letters. And part of why I did that is because, in TV shows or movies, you have the montage, right? You have the like, here's our merry band of detectives that have gotten together at the end of part one. Annika builds the sort of found family of other like brilliant outcasts, with her ex David, his ex Maher, and then Inga van Gellenhoven, who I named that just because I like saying it so much. And they have formed this sort of detective team tracing these murders that nobody else realizes are connected. But rather than taking, years to show you them like the agonizing work of like tracking these things down and everything, instead you see it as sort of almost a montage from Diablo's point of view, where she's describing the crime scenes or, hopping from city to city and talking about what's happened there and what Annika is going to find, or what Annika has already found, or what Annika has failed to find. They're very coy. And that was a way of both introducing you to Diavola as a character and building her, but also like making that time jump so that we can go from the team has become a team to the team is a well-oiled machine that has worked together for several years. So it was fun trying to figure out sort of a narrative device that allowed me to do that. And I really loved getting to put all those letters in. Initially, I didn't intend on writing all of them, but once I started, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna write all these.
I don't know how you could do a Dracula retelling without like epistolary st
Yes.
things.
Yeah, yeah, the epistolary form. And we can't do a full you can do a full epistolary
Yes.
form. I've tried to several times and always backed off. I tried to with the Dark Sun and a Little the Frankenstein. I wrote about 100 pages of it as sort of like an epistolary form, the story within a
Yeah.
story framework that they really were fond of during that time period. But the problem with an epistolary form is it can lack tension. There's a reason why it's not particularly in vogue anymore. And so playing a little bit with structure, both in this book and Lucy Undying, were my way of sort of making an homage to the epistolary form of Dracula, while also acknowledging that it's maybe not the most compelling format anymore. So yeah, playing with format a little bit was a nod to that. Yeah.
I actually super love the format, the structure of this story because you do start with the 1900
Yeah,
World Fair in Paris, and then you go into Annika and it's a few years in the past, and
yeah.
then we kind of wander a little bit through
Mhm.
time. Wh- Was it difficult to kind of pinpoint that you wanted to do this type of structure? Because it feels like a lot of work on your end.
Yeah, it definitely was a lot of work, but it's work that I enjoy because I'm obsessed with world fairs and carnivals and amusement parks. It is a theme that comes up a lot. And so getting to do all the research for the 1900s Paris World Fair was a big motivator for me in writing this book and setting it when I did. I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about the developments in forensic technology of the time. I wanted to talk about the developments in photography and cinematography of the time. And I also want to talk about the regional vampire mythology and folklore that was starting to fall out, but they were still stories that were told and were believed on a certain level in these different regions. And so all of that went into how I structured the book and how I set about telling this story. And part of the reason why I have those time jumps where I have the 5 years in the future and then you go back, I wanted that sense of a ticking clock, right? You know something very bad is coming in the future. You're seeing glimpses of how the characters you're meeting are involved in it, but you're not there yet. And I love that. I love that sense of I know where we're ending up. I just don't know how we get there. So it was really fun to play with.
I really love the first glimpse of the World Fair with Henri. He is
Yeah.
like, he's so wowed by it, but then you find out what is happening. And I was like, wait, what? I missed something.
Yeah. I mean, starting off with a bang. Basically, that was my way of cluing the reader in. Like, there are a lot of very visceral crime scenes in this book. Just so you know what you're getting. And the funniest part is, so the first chapter is Henri, a little boy who is trapped under rubble, and that actually happened. The 1900 Paris World Fair had a tremendous tragedy in which a concrete walkway leading up to a building was not properly reinforced. It collapsed, and I think it killed 9 or 12 people were trapped underneath and
Oh.
killed. And so I liked the idea of anchoring it in an actual, you know, an actual event, an actual horrendous tragedy that happened, really giving the sense of, yes, world fairs were meant to be impressive and awe-inspiring and wonderful, but also they were slapped together very quickly. There was no regulation. People were coming in and out all the time. So it was basically the perfect storm for accidents and crime. As evidenced in Devil in the White City, a brilliant novel tracing serial killer H.H. White's presence, no relation that I know of, at the Chicago World's Fair, which I love. I love that book. And so the best part, though, the best detail about this first chapter with this poor little boy slowly being crushed to death, is his name is Henri, Henri, and I actually have a nephew named Henry, spelled that way. And I told him, because I'm looking for French names, I'm looking for recognizable ones, and I was like, "Hey, Henry, is it okay if in my next book, I kill you in the very first chapter?" And he was like, "Yes." And then his sister was like, "Wait, I want you to kill me in one of your books." And I was like, "I'm so sorry, your name does not fit the time period." So yeah, I have a nephew named Henry. Sorry, Henry. But yeah, it was a good way to sort of establish the historical nature, um, the intensity, just so that again, readers are not necessarily. It's a very quick litmus test. If you read the first chapter and you're like, "This is not for me," that's okay. And then just establishing that sort of menace, that supernatural presence that is lurking on the edges, looking for these opportunities to delve into pain.
I think you did a really good job of setting expectations too of how to read this story because
Mhm.
it is very much like Henri is telling you a story about skipping school and going to the World Fair, but that's not the story.
Yeah,
That's the leading events.
yeah, yeah.
And so I loved that you kind of played with this as like a,
Mhm.
I don't know, is wonderful, okay?
Oh yeah, thank you. Well, thank you. Yes, I appreciate that.
Um, So the World's Fair, you said you did a lot of research for it.
Yeah.
What stopped you from putting the entire story just in that time frame.
Yeah, I wanted it to be very much like a found family process of self-discovery and self-acceptance and romance. And for me, that couldn't happen in the few month period of the World Fair, right? And so I needed those years for Annika to be chasing Diavola, to be building this reputation and these abilities, and to also have to reckon with who she is, who her father was, and who her father was to her. She has a very complicated relationship with him even after his death. And so for me, it was very much more anchored on Annika than just using the World's Fair as a set piece.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I brought it in periodically throughout the book by doing those sort of flash forwards, but it was always more about Annika and this long, slow process of chasing Diavola and coming to terms with there are more things in the world than I realized there were, and it is much stranger and much more dangerous.
I really love her realization of who her father really who her father wasn't.
Yeah,
And that this comes quite a bit further into the book. It's maybe halfway through, but
yeah,
she has a conversation with her mother where her mom's like, "You did not know him."
yeah, yeah.
um, that's going to be difficult.
Yeah, and for me, that's really where the story, where the idea and the character of Annika formed is I wanted to do a supernatural historical book after Lucy. I wanted it to be very, very loosely tied to Lucy Undying. It's not a sequel, it's not even a companion novel, but it's set in the same world, right? Um, and so where I came down was I love the character of Abraham Van Helsing in many adaptations. He's very dashing. He's very good at what he does. In the book Dracula, he's really not. He is so deeply ineffective.
Yeah.
He shows up. He's like, I know exactly what's happening to poor little Lucy Westenra, but I'm not going to tell any of you, and I'm not going to take any concrete steps to protect her, tell her how to protect herself, or tell any of you the reasons why you're doing these random things. And because of that, over the course of way too many chapters, Lucy's just attacked and attacked and attacked and attacked and then dead.
Mm.
And then not dead, and then they kill her again. So I'm gonna go ahead and say he's bad at his job, right? He's very patronizing. He's not a great vampire hunter. Lucy should not have died. And then there's a part in Dracula where he's talking about his life and saying that he had a son who died when he was a little boy. And he likes these men, Jonathan Harker and co., because they remind him of who his son might have grown up to be. And then he talks about his wife and says that she's crazy. She's mad with grief. He's well within his legal rights to divorce her, but because he's such a good Christian man, he hasn't divorced her. But he's taking weeks away from home, gallivanting about Europe with these people that he doesn't know, hunting a vampire, leaving her all by herself, right? So he's very, very, he like holds himself up as this sort of martyr while clearly not actually doing anything to take care of that person. And so I was like, this absolutely seems like the type of man who also had a daughter, but because he had a son that he lost, the daughter just doesn't even factor in at all for him. And so that instantly I was like, okay, so Annika's brilliant, but her father refuses to see her. He can't see it. And she's worked so hard to get his attention, to earn his admiration and his love. And just when she thinks she might be on the cusp of that, he dies. And what would that do to you as a person, right? Where you already have this very conflicted, very sort of emotionally abusive relationship, and then it's cut off before you can see it for what it's really. For what it really is, right? If she had had a few more years, I do think that Annika would have realized the type of person that her father was and would have realized that she didn't need to pursue his approval. But because it was cut off at such a crucial time, she continues to chase that and chase this idea of the father that she could have had, that she feels like she was about to have. I love really messy family relationships, which is hilarious because I have incredible parents. My dad is like the best person in the world. It's such good. I even tell them like, I'm sorry, I keep writing such bad parents in all my novels. We don't always write what we know.
Well, it hurts especially when you're reading this Annika and her father relationship story because her mother is literally right there.
Yeah.
And she's doing exactly what her dad did. She's ignoring her mom. She wants to be taking care of her. She's very loving, but she's not there, you know?
Yeah, yeah. She also is a little bit dismissive of her mother. Her mother is brilliant, but is agoraphobic, and so she won't leave the house. And that plays a little bit into the stigma that we attach both to women and to mental illness, right? Because she has this thing, this agoraphobia that won't allow her to leave the house, other people dismiss her and they overlook her when really she was always more brilliant than her husband. And she's behind the scenes doing a lot, both to support and to sidetrack Annika because she's a good parent and she's the parent who is always there. And I think sometimes that happens, right? You have the parent who's always there and the one who's supportive, but it's the damaged relationship. It's the relationship that causes those psychic wounds that is the one that you can't stop fixating on. And so yeah, that was another dynamic that was really fun to write in this book is the mother-daughter dynamic.
I just love the you brought the family in because you could have easily had like a one-off about her dad being Van Helsing, you know, and then she gallivanted.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like I love the supernatural aspects, right? But it's always got to be grounded in characters that feel real, and that's part of why I like bringing in actual historical facts and people. The Lumiere brothers, who feature in the book, real people. A lot of the figures in forensic technology, the forensic scientists that I reference in the book, or that Annika talks with, are real. And that was really fun to do because I feel like the more you ground it, you ground your characters in realistic relationships and realistic families and realistic mindsets that maybe are not perfect, and you ground the setting in realistic things that feel real because they were real, the more freedom you have to bring in those supernatural aspects because the reader has already agreed with you that this is real.
It does kind of set you into this world and like allows you to believe more than, you know, other supernatural books might.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Speaking of relationships, we're going to circle back to the main relationship. So you write a lot of sapphic stories. I think all of your books are sapphic, aren't they?
All of my recent
Adult ones, I
Yeah,
guess.
all of my adult ones are,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. Val, the main character in Mr. Magic, is bi, Mac is queer, Lucy is queer, Iris, the other point of view, and Lucy Undying is queer. Yeah, so yes. Yeah.
Um, and I don't want people to think that you are writing bad sapphic because these people have a terrible relationship. Like this is not
Because sapphics deserve bad relationships too.
true. And
Yeah.
like they do
Yeah.
feel like a really terrible couple, like people you want to not be near each other.
Yes. I mean, I definitely leaned into the Killing Eve dynamic, right? Where you're like, oh, I want you to get together, but you really should not get together. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, why include this romance if it's going to be so toxic here?
Honestly, I just thought it was fun. Like, I love anchoring things in an obsessive romance. I love having those toxic, alarming red flags because it's fiction, right? We can indulge in that in fiction. Obviously, we know in real life, if a woman murders your father, you should not date her. But in fiction, maybe you should. And yeah, just allowing, I think that's one of the really exciting things about how many stories now are coming out that center queer characters and queer experiences is we don't have to make them perfect, right? They don't have to be the shining paragon examples of what we all should be. They can be messy. They can have relationships that they probably shouldn't. They can go down paths that we know they shouldn't, but it's going to be really fun to watch as they do, because they're real, right? They're real people. They're not. They're characters, but theoretically, they're real, and so allowing them to have these messy, messed up relationships, I think is both fun, It's a fun way to tell a story and to move a plot along, but also it says a lot for uh, basically just platforming queer people and allowing us to have the same stories that everybody else has always had.
I love that we are able now to, it doesn't need to say that it's queer on it, one.
Yeah, yeah,
And two, you can make these incredibly messy people. Like they can be messy and not be detracting from the overall queerness of
yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, like it's not to me it's not primarily, like a queer love story. It's a story and the characters are queer. And I think again that push into genre and the proliferation of authentic queer voices too is are allowing us to tell new stories and fun stories and stories where I feel like we always were. People weren't acknowledging it because you read Dracula, you tell me that's not a deeply
No.
gay book. It is super gay. They just have to constantly remind you that they're good Christian men so that you don't read between the lines.
We're just gonna bite each other a lot.
Yeah, Jonathan was really into it. He was really into it. Yeah.
I love that you bring it in there though. So, and it feels natural, right? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know, these stories that you write in particular, maybe because the romance isn't the focus,
Yeah.
they feel like kind of natural. They happen and they are what they are, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's also important to me. Like Hyde, there's a very subtle romance that happens in Hyde. Mr. Magic, the main character is bi, but she's having a romance with a man. And yeah, it's never they're not romance novels. I
Yeah.
think it would be different if they were romance novels. They are, horror or supernatural, historical horror. I don't even know how to classify The Fox and the Devil. It's like Sherlock Holmes meets Dracula. And really the detective aspect of it, I think, is a more important part of the novel, but the romance is what kind of carries it through and motivates it. So yeah, I think yeah, if I were writing category romance, it would be different. But because the books are not category romance, I think I'm allowed to just present these romances very straightforward and just very natural, right? It is what it is. Nobody questions it.
I feel like nobody questions it, particularly in horror. And I
Yeah.
don't know what it is about that genre specifically. Maybe we were just indoctrinated.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like horror readers are some of the most generous, kind people out there. And the thing that I love the most about horror as a genre is it takes the things that we want to look away from and it says look closer. And by doing that, it gives us permission to engage with the worst, darkest parts of ourselves, but also tells us you are more than the worst thing that has ever happened to you. And that's really powerful and that's really important. And I do think that that's thematically something that really appeals to the queer community, but also to people who are open and loving and not prejudiced, basically. The willingness to just meet stories where they are is the same as the willingness to meet people where they are.
I really love her friends.
Hmm.
And David is like my favorite.
Yes.
Because he's snarky, and then there's this beautiful moment where he's doing the classic romance run to find your partner in a
Yes.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite things, as I've gotten older and I've accepted parts of myself and gotten more into queer culture, is I feel like it's more common to be friends with your exes than it is among straight people. At least from what I've seen, I just feel like because the community is so important and becomes your sort of found family, I feel like people generally, this is a generalization. Obviously, there's lots of exceptions. Um, are better friends with their exes and keep their exes as important parts of their lives. And so I really loved that dynamic with Annika and David, where they had a relationship, they care about each other, that care remains, and the hurt from how their relationship ended does not affect the way that they feel about each other, and they're supportive of each other. But then David has this extra complication of another member of their team, Maher, who is a crime scene photographer, is also an ex, and they had a messier ending than David and Annika did. And so, yeah, I really loved getting to center David in that, and he's just so smart. He's so loving. But he also calls Annika on things that other
Mhm.
people won't necessarily call her on because they do have that history. So yeah, that was really fun to write.
Their other companion is a young woman, and I feel like she looks up to Annika too much to be able to critique her.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So Inga, who is the daughter of Annika's mentor in the Amsterdam police department, she joins the team very young. I think she's only 17 or 18. And so she does sort of have this sense of I'm the little sister and I have to prove myself to them. And they keep trying to protect me and leave me out, but I'm an equal and I need them to see me as an equal, which was also another really fun dynamic to write because, we all have the like precocious teen genius, right? It's a fun trope, but getting to examine like if you are doing such dark, disturbing work and you are younger than everyone else, like how would that dynamic play out? I loved writing Inga. She was really fun. I do see a lot of people wanting more of Inga's story, which I would love to write someday. I've also thought about maybe writing a short story that could come out the same time as like the paperback release, but we'll see. I always have a lot of like big plans. And then I just write another book instead.
Well, speaking of another book, you actually have another book coming out this year, correct?
I have three more books coming out this year.
Woman, I can't
I
read this
know.
fast.
I know. Well, one of them is a graphic novel adaptation of Mr. Magic, which is really exciting. It's the same team that did the graphic novel adaptation of Hyde. Veronica Fish and Andy Fish are the artists, and Scott Peterson is the adapter. It's gorgeous. It's such a fun take on the story. That comes out in June. I have a book out in September that was supposed to get announced today, but it didn't, so I'm not going to talk about it. And then recently announced was the first prose novel set in the world of Something is Killing the Children, which is a really iconic, fantastic comic series by James Tynion IV and Werther Dell'Edera. Again, I am such a reader, not a talker, but that one was so interesting to read and it's so visual that trying to figure out how to translate that into just text was a really, really fun challenge. That's called Hope is a Knife and it comes out in October. And then next year I have two or three books out as well.
You write all the time, it feels like.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that to me too. It's kind of one of those things where like I'll have the books that are already on my schedule, and then I'll get an opportunity that I'm like, well, I can't pass that up, and I'll add that, and I'll be like, well, I'm full, I can't do anything else, and then I'll get somebody else reaching out, and I'll be like, well, I can't pass that up either, and then instead of having a nice year where I'm only writing two books, suddenly I'm writing four. Um, but it's what I love. There's nothing that I would rather do, and honestly. I have really high anxiety. I'm a very, very anxious person. And part of how I cope with that anxiety is by writing, and sort of channeling that constant worst case scenario going on in my head and giving it to my characters instead and putting them through constant worst case scenarios. It genuinely helps my mental health. I used to have really, really bad nightmares and stress dreams until I started writing. And then all of those shifted into my brain being like, well, this is interesting. Why is she being chased through the woods at night? What could she do to stop them? And so yeah, I'm happier and healthier when I'm writing. So I do always like to have a project. It definitely hits a point where it's too much. And I have hit that point a few times over the last couple of years. But I also just feel so lucky that I get to do this, that I get to tell stories. It's my job. I feel so lucky that people are still finding them and reading them and having amazing conversations with me about them, like this one. So even when it's too much, it still feels like such a privilege to get to do it that I don't mind.
I feel like kind of going back to you mentioned you have anxiety. I also have anxiety, and I feel like people with anxiety gravitate towards horror because it's
Yes.
controlled anxiety.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's the catharsis, right?
Yeah,
You get to engage however you want. I actually gravitate the most toward horror when I am the most stressed out or anxious in my real life because it's controlled, right? I might not be able to fix the things that are going wrong in my life, but I can read 300 pages of something really bad happening to someone else and being like, you know what? I'm okay.
it's not that
Um,
bad.
it's not that bad. Yeah, that tension and then the release of tension and the catharsis, I think, is so important in horror, and I think it is part of what attracts anxious readers.
So you mentioned you have a few other books, and we're not going to talk about the projects are, but are they in the realm of horror still?
Yeah, so Something That's Killing the Children is firmly horror, very much so. I'd say it's more in line with Hyde. Um, and then I do have another project in the works with Del Rey and my editor at Del Rey, Trisha Narwani, who is the editor for Hyde, Mr. Magic, Lucy, and The Fox and the Devil. She's so brilliant. I'm not talking about that one yet because I haven't even
Yeah.
started, but like I've about 100 pages, but I haven't started writing. But it is more, I would say it's more in line with Mr. Magic in terms of
Okay.
its modern day real world setting, but with a supernatural element over the top of it. Also heavily influenced by my upbringing in Utah. Um, and I love you, Utah, but also, wow, you're messed up. And then I have two YA projects out next year. One is horror and one is more paranormal romance, kind of dark academia, but sparkly dark academia, because I like being funny. And I can't always be funny in these books. And then, yeah, I think that's all. And then a YA one that is firmly horror also. So yeah, a lot of them are horror. A couple of the ideas that I have on the horizon are not horror at all.
Yet.
But that's something else. Yeah, that's something else I've been really grateful for in my career is that I have had the freedom to kind of jump around and do a lot of different things because I get bored.
I'm genuinely surprised by the number of people who write horror and also YA or even middle school fiction.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
fact that you can translate between the two.
Yeah, I actually had a period of time where I was writing a middle grade series. I have the Sinister Summer series, 5 books, and I was writing those between, I think, Hyde and Mr. Magic. And it was really nice getting to go back and forth between the two because I could go really dark, no holds barred, and then I could go whimsical and wordplay and being really gentle to these characters because they're only 12. And it's almost like a palate cleanser. But I do think part of that is especially when it comes to funny, is horror and humor are two sides of the same coin, right? Horror, you take the familiar and you shift it so that it becomes uncanny, or threatening. And then humor, you take the familiar and you shift it so that it becomes absurd. And so it's the same movement, it's just different directions. And so I do think people who are good at horror tend to also be good at humor. And humor plays so well in middle grade,
Yeah.
that yeah, there are like I know T. Kingfisher. It's also Ursula Vernon, who writes delightful middle grade. Um, and now I can't think of anybody else, but there are.
There are some. I know there are.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Paul Tremblay didn't he just have his first like middle grade come out? I
I don't
want
know
to
if it was
say,
this first one, but I know he came out with a younger audience
yeah,
book.
yeah. So it's fun, and some of them just like scaring kids too, in addition to adults, which is also okay.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on like children's horror stories,
Yeah.
right? Like R.L. Stein and
Yes.
um, scary stories to tell in the dark.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yes, me too. I used to take Goosebumps to school and like read them under my desk. Fear Street were too scary for me, so I'd make my older sister read them and then tell me the entire plot. And then I was brave enough to read them because I knew everything that was going to happen. I was actually a very, very fearful child. I wanted a scary aesthetic, but I really did not like scary stories or scary movies. And so taking control of those, I think, also was a big part of my journey through anxiety. Can I just say, I've met Earl Stein. He is the kindest, sweetest human being ever. I was at a book conference, like a big book festival, and I was in the author green room, and he was sitting at a table by himself, and I was like, gotta do it. So I sat down at the same table as him, and he looked up and he says, "Hi, I'm Bob." And I was like, "Oh, I know who you are." I was obsessed with your books as a kid, but he was also so sweet because there was just no sense of, he's probably one of the best-selling authors in the world, right? And he just treated everybody there like we were doing the same thing because we are, although technically, he's done it a lot more successfully than basically anyone. But he was just so kind and so sweet. And honestly, all of the horror authors that I've met are. It's just a good community, and I feel the same way about readers. It's great.
Well, where can your readers find you online?
I am on Instagram and Threads at author Kiersten White. My website is kierstenwhite.com and is only ever about 6 to 12 months out of date. And that's it. I don't do email. I'm not on any other social media. Um, yeah.
And is there a place where folks can buy signed copies of your books, like a local in your own town or something?
Yes, my local indie is Mysterious Galaxy in San Diego. They're an incredible genre bookstore. I love them. They have the most amazing staff. Actually, when I wanted to start writing horror, I went to their horror expert, Rob, and just had him load me up with like the most interesting and groundbreaking and unusual things that were happening in modern horror. And he gave me a whole education on it. This was years ago. But I just so appreciate that. I so appreciate them. And they will nearly always have signed copies of my books on hand. I know they have signed copies of The Fox and the Devil right now. And then I'm in there fairly frequently. I'm in there, at least every couple months. So if you do order something from them and it's not signed, I can get in there to sign it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm so jelly that your local bookstore's Mysterious Galaxy
Oh,
then.
they're amazing. Yeah. Yeah. I'm so lucky.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Yes, thank you. This was such a great conversation. I loved it.
If anybody out there has not yet picked up The Fox and the Devil, I highly suggest it. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, please like the podcast and follow it. It just makes it so much easier for me to keep doing what I'm doing. And anyway, thank you. This has been UpperPen, and my name is Dakota. Thank you, and have a lovely, lovely day. Bye.